Hi, I'm Ed Brusky. We're talking about how you can start your own vegetable garden. Right now we're going to talk a little bit about planting seeds outside directly in the soil. And what you see me doing here is I have a parsley plant and a cilantro plant that are both going to seed. They were planted last year. Parsley is a biennial, meaning it has a 2-year cycle. It still has some good leaves on it, but this time of year, all it wants to do is get big and make seeds. So we're going to get it out of the way, find a home for it in our compost heap, as well as the cilantro plant. But as soon as they're gone, I want to plant something new. I practice something that's called succession planting, which means when one plant is done, we come right behind it and plant something else. We usually do that 3 times a year. So we'll have 3 crops each year, and we rotate things so that we're not always planting the same thing in one spot. To get this bed ready to plant, I would get any weeds or any plants out of here that I can, just to make sure that they're not going to come back and haunt us. There are always weed seeds around, either in the soil or coming through the air or deposited by animals and birds and things. So you're always going to have some weeds. And when you're just planting seeds in the soil, those tiny little plants coming up then are competing for weeds. And it's very hard to get rid of the weeds without doing damage to your new little plants. So that's something we can contend with. Sometimes you'll see me out here weeding with a dinner fork, but don't tell my wife. Okay, the next step after I've gotten rid of any weeds in here, or any plant material, is I sprinkle on about a ½ an inch, just a thin layer of compost, and work that into the soil. That's to add some fertility that may have been taken up by the previous plants, give the microbes in the soil something fresh to munch on. And I do that each time I plant a crop. So the soil is getting 3 applications of compost during the course of the season. And I'll work this in with my stirrup hoe. This is one of the things I use my stirrup hoe for a lot. And that is to rake this bed smooth and incorporate the compost that I've just added to the soil to a depth of 2 inches or so, not terribly deep. Now the next step is just to go down 10 or 12 inches and just give a slight heave with the fork spade to get make sure there's some air down there and a little looseness, and that it's draining well. Not turn it, not overturn that whole ecosystem down there, all those microbes, but just gently loosen it up a little bit. Now, my final step for preparing this little bed that I'm working on is to just go over it lightly with my hand, smooth it out, even it out a little bit, and break up any of the big clods that I might find in here. Sometimes I find little stones, and if I'm paying attention, I'll have a bucket handy so I can get the stones in a bucket and take them to my rock pile, which has gotten pretty big by now. After you work a bed for a few years, it'll become so soft that you won't even see clods like this anymore. But when I do find them, I like to break them up because that gives the seeds a much better chance of putting down roots if they're not competing with big clods of dirt. Now I'm going to mark my little section of the garden bed, and as you can see, I'm not doing anything very fancy at all. I'm just using these old bamboo stakes in my eyeballs here to mark out 2 relatively equal sections. One is going to be for arugula, and one is going to be for dill. Most of the sun is coming from this direction here, so the arugula, which is shorter, you want to put it in front of the dill, which is taller, so the arugula isn't shaded by the dill. I have my seed packets here, and there's always important information on the seed packets. For instance, how the plants grow, how much sun they need, whether they like shade, or how far apart to space them. Now, the spacing for arugula isn't that important, or for dill. Importantly, what it says on here is that arugula and dill both kind of like a little bit of shade, which is a good thing because we're backed up against the house here on the north side. So round about noontime, the sun will be disappearing from that part of the garden. But interestingly enough, at the very peak of the summer, when the sun is the highest in the sky, this area will actually be getting a blast of sun in the late afternoon from this area. So it's kind of a interesting pick, arugula and dill in this spot. I think they'll do very well here. So what I'll do is open the arugula first. Okay, to broadcast the seeds, I first pour some into the palm of my hand like this. Okay, so I've got them in my hand. Just before I sprinkle these seeds over the ground, I'm just going to rough up the ground a little bit where I've already made it so nice and smooth using this hand cultivator. It's kind of a claw. Then I simply sprinkle this on here like as if I were seasoning the soil with these seeds. Now I just take the palm of my hand and sort of stir it lightly where I've sown the seeds. Some people like to pour more soil over the top or scatter more soil on top, but I feel this usually does the trick. The seeds are so small they don't need to be planted to a great depth. The general rule is you plant seeds about 3 times the depth to the width of the seed. So for a tiny little seed like we just planted, that's hardly any depth at all. And you might have a much deeper hole for something like a big lima bean seed. That might go down 1.5 inches or 2 inches. Now we're going to turn to our dill here, which is the same process as before. When you're thinking about the things you want to plant in your garden, know what they're going to do eventually. Sometimes they spread out. They send runners far distances. They grow up really tall. You want to know those things so they don't interfere with your other gardening plans. Well, now that we got that planted, what we'll do is use our watering can or our water one and water those in. Next, we're going to talk about how to transplant those seedlings that you